This is the cordless sander that finally let me stop fighting power cords and start focusing on the wood. It smooths fast, runs steady, and has just enough finesse that I trust it on projects where I cannot afford swirl marks. It is a random Orbital sander in the compact, 5-inch category, and it is built for people who move around their work. I reach for it when I am sanding furniture pieces, built-ins, and trim where I want clean control and a good finish on the first pass. If you work in a small shop, on a job site, or out on a deck where outlets are never where you need them, this fits right in. If you already use the DEWALT battery system, it drops into your setup with no learning curve. Design first, because that decides how it feels after a long session. The body is short and planted, so my hand sits low and close to the work. That low center of gravity matters more than any spec sheet because it is what keeps the sander from tipping at the edge of a board. The top grip has a thick rubber overmold that stays grippy even when dusty. The power switch is a sealed button on the front, so dust does not get into it. The speed dial is right next to my thumb. I do not have to adjust my grip to find it, which is rare on tools like this. The pad uses a hook and loop face, so sanding discs peel off and stick on quickly. The dust bag locks in with a quarter turn and snaps tight. The bag is small, but the latch is secure, and it empties without a puff of dust in my face. There is a rear port that connects to a vacuum with an adapter, and that makes a big difference when I am sanding indoors. Setup is the kind of simple that encourages me to do one more pass instead of putting it off. I pop on a disc, press the power button, and spin the dial if I need more or less speed. It kicks on smoothly, not abruptly, so the pad does not hop and gouge. When I shut it off, it stops quickly, which helps when I am working along an edge or near a miter. The vibration is well controlled. My hands are not buzzing after a long run. That matters way more than raw power because consistent control is what delivers a good finish. On speed and responsiveness, the variable dial gives a real range. At lower settings, I can finesse a thin veneer or blend a patch without burning. At the top end, it removes material fast with a coarse disc. The motor does not surge or bog when I lean into it a bit. It holds a steady orbit. I would describe the noise as a lower, smoother tone than most sanders. I still wear hearing protection for long sessions, but I can actually talk over it for short bursts, which I cannot say for some older sanders I used to own. Core performance is about how quickly it flattens, how evenly it sands, and whether it leaves random scratches. With quality discs, it levels end grain and hardwood edges predictably, and it resists leaving pigtails as long as I keep the pad clean and the dust moving. The brake on the pad does its job, so I can set it down on the work with the motor running and not leave a scar. The random orbit pattern blends beautifully when I step through grits. I lean on it for surfaces that will show finish flaws, like a dining table top or a face frame next to a painted panel. I have paired it with a vacuum on delicate work, and the combination keeps the paper clear longer. That extends the life of each disc and keeps heat down so I do not glaze the surface. For real-world context, I have been using this sander regularly for more than a year. I have smoothed a maple tabletop after a glue-up, cleaned up stair treads that had an uneven factory finish, and stripped peeling paint from deck rails before resealing. On the tabletop, I started with a medium grit and ran the speed in the middle of the dial. It flattened the glue lines without digging in. I did not have to chase any deep swirls later with a higher grit, which saved time. On the painted deck rails, I bumped the speed up and used a coarse disc. The sander ate through the loose paint while keeping the corners crisp. When the sun warmed the rails and the paint got gummy, I dialed the speed down a notch, and that reduced clogging. On stair treads, I sanded with a vacuum attached. Dust control was strong enough that I could keep working inside without a cloud forming, and the surface felt uniform end to end. Battery behavior matters a lot on a cordless sander, because sanding is usually a long task. With the 5 amp-hour battery that comes in the kit, I typically get around 40 to 50 minutes of steady, medium-speed sanding on a medium grit disc before I feel the performance dip and swap packs. That is enough to finish a shelf, a set of drawers, or a couple of doors in one go. When I use a larger 60-volt battery from the Flex Volt line, The balance shifts a little heavier toward the rear, but the runtime stretches meaningfully, and I can go longer between breaks. For small projects, the compact 2 amp-hour packs feel incredibly light, and the tool becomes very nimble, though I change batteries more often. The nice part is that I can choose the pack based on the day's task. I appreciate that flexibility. Comfort over time is a quiet virtue with this sander. The weight feels centered over the pad, not top-heavy. The grip lets me wrap my hand without stretching my fingers, and the rubber surface keeps a sure hold even when the dust bag is getting full. The vibration damping means I can sand long enough to finish a panel without a tingle lingering in my fingertips. I have a habit of letting the sander do the work rather than pressing down. With this tool, that technique pays off. Letting it float with light pressure gives the cleanest finish and the most consistent scratch pattern. Dust collection works better than I expected from the bag alone, as long as I empty it often. When I connect a vacuum, dust capture becomes excellent and the paper stays sharp longer. My practical tip is to tap the bag out into a trash bin every few minutes instead of waiting until it is packed. If you skip that, dust will start to cake, and you will notice the surface quality fall off. The only gripe I have is that the kit does not include a universal adapter for every vacuum hose. Mine works with a shop vacuum using an adapter I already had, but I needed to buy that separately. Also, the dust bag is small, so for bigger jobs, a vacuum is the way to go. One specific use case that sold me on this sander was a refinishing project on a solid oak dining table. The old finish had small divots and a few scratches that caught the light. I clamped a straight board along the edge to keep my passes square and worked diagonally across the surface at a medium speed with a medium grit disc. The tool kept a steady pattern, and because it does not have excessive vibration, I could feel when the high spots vanished under the pad. I stepped through finer grits, slowed the speed a bit, and finished with light passes. The final surface took stain evenly without telegraphing sanding marks. That is when I retired my corded sander for good. The cordless freedom made it easier to move around the table and keep a consistent pace without wrestling a cable. A few smarter touches deserve credit. The speed dial is usable with gloves on, and the clicky resistance keeps it from drifting mid-pass. The sealed power button has held up after a year of dust. The hook and loop pad spreads heat well and is easy to replace. I did swap the pad after several months because the edges wore down from a lot of edge work, and the replacement took less than a minute. The sander stops quickly when I shut it off, which reduces accidents, and the overall noise level is lower and less shrill than many sanders I have used, which matters when you spend a whole afternoon smoothing parts. It is not perfect. The dust bag fills fast, so you will be emptying it often if you are not using a vacuum. The vacuum port adapter situation is not plug and play for every hose, so plan on finding the right sleeve if you do not already have one. The speed numbers on the dial can get dusty and hard to read, though I navigate by feel now and it is fine. Raw power is slightly less aggressive than a big corded sander with a larger pad, which is expected, but for most furniture and trim work, the balance of control and removal speed is right where I want it. If you are a do-it-yourself builder, a furniture hobbyist, or a pro who already lives in the DEWALT battery family, this sander makes a lot of sense. It is easy to control, it sands clean, it keeps dust in check, and it runs long enough on a 5 amp-hour pack to knock out real work. If you are mostly flattening large slabs or heavy epoxy pours, a bigger, corded machine still has its place. For everything else, from shelves to doors to railings to tabletops, this is the one I reach for first. I like tools that disappear in use, and this one does exactly that. It lets me focus on the surface, not on the tool. You can find detailed information about the DEWALT DCW210P1 20V Max Random Orbital Sander Kit in the comments section. See you in the next video.